The International Day for Persons Living with Disabilities, IDPD, was celebrated on the 3rd of December around the world. It's a day dedicated to mobilizing support for critical issues relating to the inclusion of persons with disabilities, promoting awareness, raising conversations about disability, and drawing attention to the benefits of an inclusive and accessible society for all.
IDPD aims to promote the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities in all spheres of society and development. This year's theme, being transformative solutions for inclusive development, the role of innovation in fueling an accessible and equitable world. While this day has been observed in various ways over the weekend, it is important for us to continue to place importance on these issues. And this morning we have joining us Oluwafemi Oladumi. He is a disability rights activist and founder I Care Initiative. Good morning, Mr. Oladumi, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
All right, I want us to first of all start with understanding what inclusion means in the perspective that we're talking about this morning. What exactly does it mean to have an inclusive society for persons living with disabilities?
Yeah, it's a situation whereby everybody in the world is being carried along, right, in social, political, and economic well-being of their state, of their country, and wherever they find themselves. We see that, persons with disabilities are often, discriminated against, and, they are not being included in so many things, so many aspects of life, or aspect of a country or a state where they belong. So the purpose is just to ensure that, they are being carried along. No one is left behind in the issue of, economic development, politics, and other aspects of life.
I mean, these are very important conversations that you have raised. Would you say that we've had enough attention, thrown in this regard? Would you say that a lot of people are speaking about this? And why is this conversation important to you?
Yeah, we've not gotten enough attention, let me put it that way, because we still see that in some, developing or underdeveloping countries, we still see that, measures are still not being put in place to see that, people or persons with disabilities are included in every sphere of life, to make sure that, they are actively participating. So my own interest is that I'm also, living with disabilities, and I see what I enjoy in an advanced country. I'm in the US. I see what I enjoy here, and I see that, people back home in Nigeria, in other African countries, are still not enjoying the same rights, the same privileges that I enjoyed in the US, and that persons living with disability also in the US enjoy. So they are not really enjoying it.
Maybe we should ask you to paint a picture. It's important, what you've just said. You're in the US and you're a person living with disabilities, and you've seen some of the benefits that you currently enjoy that people back home in Nigeria are not enjoying. So can you maybe paint a picture for us to see the contrast between what's obtainable in Nigeria and what you're experiencing in the US?
All right, thank you so much. There's accessibility to healthcare, accessibility to public buildings. There's accessibility to things that that will better their lives. Persons with disabilities life here in the US, but the reverse is the case in Africa. We see that. Okay, I'm going to use Nigeria as an example because that is that's our subject matter. So Nigeria, there's no accessibility for persons living with disability. You cannot see, aside from BRT, who has, they've been trying to make sure that, there's easy accessibility. But if you go to banks, you see that persons with disabilities cannot go to the bank because they don't have, wheelchair accessibility, because measures are not being put in place to cater for them.
Okay, now I want us to talk about something that the Nigerian government was, praised for, the ratification of the Person Living with Disability Act in 2018. It was eventually ratified in 2019. Did that change anything? Because that's, 3 years ago. Has that changed much for people living with disabilities in Nigeria? Or was it just, put into law and everyone went to sleep?
So there has never been any significant changes to issues being faced by persons with disability. Persons with disability are still being discriminated against. They still have limited access. They still have discriminatory empathy or sympathy. And, They don't have access to a quality education. They don't have access to quality healthcare. It has not changed anything. The social protection of persons with disability is still relatively weak. So the law is just there on paper. You know, there's a mandatory period for public buildings to be changed to bring accessibility. You go to a lot of public buildings in Nigeria right now, nothing has been changed. So it's just law on paper, just like we know in Nigeria that, okay, there are laws, but they only exist on paper. But the actualization, the enforcement, the implementation is zero.
I mean, there's so much that can be done. If we look at Nigeria, for example, about 9 states have enacted disability laws to safeguard the rights of people living with disabilities. But let's ask what can actually be done. We're seeing here that there is a law, and what is obtainable or what exists is a far cry from what is expected. What roles can individuals, people who are in government, regular individuals, what roles can they play in ensuring that they bring to pass this inclusion for people living with disabilities?
Thank you. If you look at the provision of discrimination against persons with disability prohibition act, you see that, you know, section 2 provides that, you know, the Federal Ministry of Information should create an awareness. First, people need to know that, hey, there are people with disabilities, there are stuff you should do, there are stuff you should not do. That is one. And two is that persons with disability themselves need to know they need to be aware that they have this right that is being, you know, instituted by government that they can enjoy. So third is that we see that there are equal participation. We have persons with disabilities that go to school, let them get employed. We have they have special abilities that you see that in every walk of life, you put person with disability in that place, you see that there will be an active transformation. So what we need to do right now is to make sure that they participate in their own development. And people such as everyone else in the world or in Nigeria needs to be aware that if I do this against persons with disability, there are consequences.
Yeah. All right, this year's theme focuses on innovation in fueling an accessible and equitable world. What does that mean for you? And of course, what's the bigger picture across the continent?
Well, we still need to look at Africa. Africa is still lacking in stuff like this, you know. Innovative transformations, we should, I'm sorry, I'm going to use Nigeria as an example right now, because that is my primary constituency right now. So government should take a deliberate step in ensuring that persons with disabilities are being carried along. Proactive steps in such that the healthcare, social, political needs of these people are being met. Because if you look at Nigeria, for example, about 25 million of Nigerians are living with one form of disability or the other. And 8 out of every Nigerian are living with disabilities. So there's need that these persons should be carried along.
All right, there's so much work that needs to be done. Unfortunately, very recently, Nigeria has been, you know, the National Bureau of Statistics has said that Nigeria, 133 million Nigerians are living in poverty. Are there fears about how this might affect the people living with disabilities? And, you know, what's roles, how can people be a part of the work that you're doing? Like you mentioned earlier, we need information out, but it doesn't seem that there's enough people talking about this. So what roles can people play in being a part of the work that you're doing?
Thank you. In Africa, most especially in Nigeria, you see that, you know, disabilities is likened to poverty. So once you have disability, there's every chances of you being poor in Africa, in Nigeria as a whole. So, but what people need to do is that they need to, you know, like I said, and I'll keep on saying, they need to carry these people along. The persons with disabilities suffer a lot of trauma, emotional trauma, and a lot of stigmatization. So we should see the need to carry them along. They are part of us. Like, you know, when I was growing up in Nigeria, it was a different story entirely. That, you know, people will abandon you, people will leave you. And we've had similar stories of persons with disability out there in Nigeria. So there's need for for people to see that, hey, these people have special need and we need to meet their special needs.
All right, Mr. Oladuni, thank you so much for your time this morning. Obviously, there's so much more work that needs to be done, not just here in Nigeria, but across the continent. And I look forward to seeing that the 2018 Act in Nigeria, there is some level of implementation. I want to see banks, I want to see hospitals, I want to see public buildings, start to, understand that, there will be people living with disabilities coming to those places. And
we have a 1 year, we have 1 year deadline, Osage. We have 1 year to go. And I don't know how much we can cover in that 1 year.
Thanks, Dr. Oladuni, for your time, and we'd love to speak to you again.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.